listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, what happened to Gus Lamont? The 4-year-old vanished from his family's remote property in South Australia almost 8 weeks ago. And still authorities are no closer to working out what happened. Now search teams are concentrating on disused mine shafts in the area. We unpack the latest information and developments with a top forensic expert. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Tuesday, the 25th of November. Pauline Hanson has hit back after being suspended from the Senate for 7 days. A motion was raised by Foreign Minister Penny Wong after the One Nation leader wore a burqa into the Senate yesterday. The motion claimed Miss Hanson, quote, engaged in behaviour in the chamber that was intended to vilify and mock people on the basis of their religion. It's the first Senate suspension since 1979. Miss Hanson holding a news conference after the decision and says she is not worried at all.
I'll stand my ground on what I believe in. I will continue to do so. And, it will be the people that will judge me. I will be standing for the next election in Queensland, and I will let the people of Queensland judge me whether I have earned my place to be re-elected again or not. I will not let these people here judge me.
A 15-year-old boy who's been charged with the alleged stabbing murder of a 17-year-old near a school in Sydney's northwest has faced court. Police say the alleged murder could have been a robbery gone wrong after the teenager was stabbed in the leg around 4:20 yesterday afternoon. He died at the scene. The 17-year-old's girlfriend has been one of many leaving heartfelt tributes online, saying her boyfriend would always be remembered. And the Macquarie Dictionary is the latest to unveil its word of the year. It's AI slop, which the dictionary defines as low-quality content created by artificial intelligence, often containing errors and not requested by the user. Other words on this year's shortlist were ate and left no crumbs, which means you performed or executed something perfectly, and attention economy, which describes attention as a major commodity, especially when it comes to the time a consumer spends viewing a product. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with a forensic anthropologist on the renewed search for Gus Lamont in outback South Australia. The 4-year-old was last seen around 5 p.m. on the 27th of September at his grandparents' remote sheep station. Almost 2 months later, he's still missing and there's still no sign of Gus, with authorities yesterday announcing they will start searching a number of old mine shafts in the area. Joining us is Xanthe Mallet, who says this latest case is one of our nation's most baffling. Xanthe, thanks for joining us. If we can just recap exactly what is going on with this case. We know that Gus disappeared up to, it was almost 8 weeks ago now, and has never been seen since.
Yeah, and there have been a number of searches of different areas, expansive searches, like hundreds of meters using drones and other technologies, very detailed ground searches, and yet not a single sign of this child has been seen in 8 weeks now. And this new search is focusing on some mine shafts that are on the property. There are around 6 mine shafts that are uncovered, unfenced, and that is where the police will search over the next 3 days.
Xanthe, we know for search crews and the family involved, this would be incredibly heartbreaking at the moment, and we know authorities do the very best they can to find any clues or to find Gus. In regards to, we understand there could be the possibility of new information that has led to this new search of these mine shafts. Why weren't the mine shafts searched beforehand?
Well, apparently the police weren't aware of these mine shafts until very recently. And obviously, they are triaging different areas that we think are most likely to be where Gus may be located. And so obviously this is the next search. My sense is they don't necessarily expect to find anything during this search. I mean, we all hope that they do. That family desperately need answers, but they have to search there. Even if they just rule it out, they have to make sure that they've ticked every box in looking for this little child. Because as you say, they're humans. And I did do an interview, I won't name the outlet, but they were quite critical of the police and the search and how it's, quote, failed. And I reminded them that they're people. These people go home every night to their families. Probably only the family, Gus's actual family, are more desperate to find this little boy than those searchers. So we have to remember that they're human too, and they're doing absolutely everything in their power to find this little boy.
It's very unusual in these cases we know he's 4, that for children to wander off, especially considering how remote this property is. There has been no sign of him since a family member saw him around 5 p.m. late September.
Yeah, and that is very unusual. I mean, kids do wander off. Maybe he'd gone looking for his mum. She was on another part of the property because he was with his grandmother at the time that he disappeared. But what's really unusual, and I did read a piece that highlighted this by a police officer, they said that kids drop things everywhere, and the fact that nothing has been found, not a shoe, no sign of him at all, is very unusual given the depth and the breadth of the search that has been ongoing now for 8 weeks. It's really extraordinary that no single clue has been found.
Also, in regards to the ongoing investigations, Xanthe, we know there was a dam close by to this homestead that unfortunately we know many children, for whatever reason, are attracted to waters. There was concern that he may have drowned. The dam was searched in the first couple of weeks and then authorities returned to then sweep that dam. Why wouldn't they have swept that extensively the first time they searched the dam?
Well, I'm sure that when they first searched the dam, they did think that they'd done a thorough job, but perhaps they just wanted to make absolutely sure because, they searched that area, they then moved on, remember, and they're using their resources to best ability to make sure they're covering as much ground as they can because in those early days, they were still looking for a little boy who'd wandered off in essence. And so sadly, as time has progressed, it's extremely unlikely that Gus will now be found alive. But in that early time, that's what they were looking for. So they searched that area, they moved on. And I think they're just really trying to make sure that they've been absolutely thorough. So making sure they didn't miss anything because to them, it's also extraordinary that they haven't managed to find a single clue. So they're just making sure that they're not missing anything that could lead them to discover where Gus is.
We know across many properties and different landscapes across Australia, there are these mine shafts. We know that was a big area that authorities were looking at regarding that murder in Bendigo. And all throughout Broken Hill, all of those areas in New South Wales, there's disused, very dangerous mine shafts. Is it true it's very hard to actually search them properly?
It certainly is. And you need specialist equipment and you need specialist teams. And that's what's been brought in now to search these 6 mine shafts on that property. So yeah, it's not easy. It's dangerous. It's difficult and highly technical. So they've got individuals who are specially trained, bringing all the equipment they need, but they have to do it very carefully because it's an extremely dangerous task.
How difficult, Xanthe, would it be for investigators right now? As you mentioned earlier, there are no clues. As far as we know, and authorities have said that Gus's family and extended family have been incredibly cooperative with authorities as the investigation continues. How difficult is it for authorities to work out what happened to Gus when there are no obvious clues at the moment?
It's extremely difficult because you have a 4-year-old who you would think would leave a path that they could follow, and that hasn't been the case here. And just without any information to go on, they've got a huge area to search that's very dangerous. It's rugged. You have these areas such as mine shafts to consider and dams, and they have no idea in which direction to look. So they have to look in all directions, all at the same time. And that's incredibly difficult and very frustrating for those officers because as far as the public's aware, there are no leads at this stage. And it's just a huge mystery. Suddenly a little boy vanishes and then nothing. It's totally inexplicable.
Xanthe, there have been a number of mysterious cases regarding missing children in Australia. We know the horrible case in South Australia with the 3 missing Beaumont children. That mystery has never been solved. We know Daniel Morecambe was missing for many years before his poor parents found out what happened to Daniel. And of course, then there is the case in northern New South Wales in Kendall, where we know William Tyrrell disappeared more than a decade ago, and we're still no closer to finding out what happened. Do you think there is an element that we may never know what happened with Gus?
I sincerely hope not. We describe it as ambiguous loss. And I mean, you've spoken to many families as well, and you know that they never speak of closure, but they can get resolution if they find out what happened and why. And the not knowing is what families say is the most difficult part. So, you know, we have the William Tyrrells, as you mentioned, we have the missing Beaumonts, and that still rocks Adelaide. I've been there. I've talked to people, even people who were not born when the Beaumont children vanished, know that story, and it still impacts that community. So there is something deeply moving about a missing child. And I still have hope that we will find Gus. And I know all the searchers do too. And that's what's driving them every day to keep doing this incredibly difficult work. So I have to remain hopeful that one day we will find answers.
Xanthe, if you can take us for a moment behind the scenes with what investigators may look at, for example, a missing child case, take us through, and we never know what happens behind closed doors, but the Gus scenario, what would have been the first thing that investigators looked at, and what would investigators still be trying to find out?
Well, in any missing child investigation, it really depends on the age of the child as well as all of the circumstances around it. But ultimately, you have three options. One, a child has run away, very unusual in a toddler case, a young child case. You're talking more teens. One is that they've wandered off and have suffered some sort of misadventure, an accident. And the third is that there's been third-party involvement. And that third-party involvement is broken down into further subcategories. It can be familial. If it's a familial abduction, it's normally in the context of a custody dispute, and that accounts for around 50% of young children who are taken. Largely, they're recovered unharmed because they're taken because the other parent wants them. And so the other 50% is split between acquaintance abductions and stranger abductions. And when it's a stranger abduction, especially of a toddler, that's when they are most at risk. And recovery in that circumstance is actually pretty unlikely. So the police would have looked at all of those scenarios. They would have discounted the runaway scenario pretty early on. They would have had to have considered whether this was a familial abduction. And that's not a slight on this family at all. It's just part of the process the police have to consider. So they would have looked at the family. They would have looked at who was with him when he vanished and who knew he was at that property. And they would have gone very carefully through those stages to make sure there wasn't a third party involved. And simultaneously, they would have been looking at a little boy who's wandered off and perhaps had an accident. They would have considered whether he'd been taken by a stranger, but given how remote this location is, that seems incredibly unlikely. But they would have worked all of those scenarios simultaneously until the evidence told them which was the most likely.
So, Xanthe, it seems at this stage, and we don't have inside knowledge of exactly what investigators may have or don't have at the moment, but right now, it seems that Gus has literally disappeared into thin air. What do you believe has happened to Gus?
Oh, wow. I mean, I've thought about this a lot and I really don't know. I mean, they've been very clear that the family is being very helpful. It seems extremely unlikely that a stranger would have just happened across him and it was a situational abduction, just like of the moment. And so you have to think that the most likely situation, which seems to be the one the police are reflecting in their searches, are that he is a little boy who's wandered off and has suffered an accident. There is no crime here, but that doesn't explain why there's no sign of him. So, I've never seen a case quite like this, that this could happen, that a little boy could vanish in this way. And 8 weeks later, we're no further along to knowing what happened. So I really don't know. None of my experiences is helping me in this case, unfortunately.
Xanthe, let's hope authorities get some answers soon about exactly what may have happened to little Gus, and we're thinking of his family at the moment. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tosh.
That was forensic anthropologist Xanthe Mallet. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'll be back tonight with an episode of The Beefing on Pete Evans versus the TGA. And we'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.